I'm always fascinated by the symbolism of the bridge. And, I was taught that I am a bridging person that weaves things together. And when I look back, I see the bridges in my life, culminating in this particular bridge, which is so utterly famous. Of course, the Golden Gate. And I love the name of it. Because for me, it is a golden gate, linking two worlds, the mainland of San Francisco, which is utterly beautiful place. It's a very confined land, so the value of the land on that peninsula is extremely high. What's it saying? Oh, it's doing.
Saying everything you're saying.
Okay, do we want that? I don't know. I didn't ask for it, but at any rate, yes.
It's good for accessibility.
This bridge connects the upper reaches of the San Francisco area, which is not densely built up. It has a group of small towns which are they're very special. Places like Sausalito, where people live on boats. There's Mill Valley, and so forth. But you drive through that, and then you're into an area of redwood forests, and redwood forests are stunningly magnificent compared to what we experience here in southern Ontario. I mean, southern Ontario has its beautiful strengths as well, but this one is unique. It's a very unique place. It's a tenuous place because it is cut through by the great San Andreas Fault. So the imminence of earthquake is constant when you're in San Francisco, whether people articulate it or not. They're very earthquake conscious and thinking about what they will do when the earth shakes. So I was having coffee with some San Francisco friends, and one of them said to me when we talked about earthquakes, he said, "We don't live in an earthquake zone for nothing. I mean, this place is worth living in, even with the imminent danger." Okay, great. This lecture is sort of part of my responsibilities as an elder of the school. That I deliver a lecture about elderhood. I've done this in previous terms, but this is a little different because it focuses on my education. But before we get to my education, we'll talk a little bit about my background and where I was born. How I became an elder. Now, at the top of this is an image of the hands of Jacob Ezra Thomas with the two-row wampum, which you see in front of you. The wampum is the agreement between settlers and native people. It's still in effect, that we would share the waters of this place equally and side by side forever. It's a beautiful agreement. If the settlers had taken it seriously, this place would not look like it looks today, because what it looks like today is the erasure of any native presence, except for someone like myself giving the lecture here. I just want to say this is going to be principally about my doctoral journey, because it was training in elderhood. It was in the traditional knowledge and recovery of indigenous mind programs in the School of Consciousness and Transformation. This is how this school portrayed my program. It's huge. The School of Consciousness, Transformation, Recovery, Indigenous Mind, Traditional Knowledge. I mean, all of these terms are profoundly loaded and all consolidated in this program at the California Institute of Integral Studies in San Francisco. I attended there between 1995 and the year 2000. Actually, the year 2001 is when I graduated. Now, as a Native person, I have a Native name. My Native name is Raweno. Raweno. He's the one who dips the words from the water. It's a very honored name. It's in the Deer Clan of the Cayuga Nation. I am in the Bear Clan of the Mohawks at Six Nations of the Grand River, but I was adopted by the Deer Clan in the Cayuga Nation, from which that name came. I have a degree in architecture from the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. I went there from 1965 to 1970. Ann Arbor is an absolutely beautiful place of high order learning. It's an ultimate place of civilization, I'll have to say that. Then these doctoral studies were carried out in California and in Ontario. You'll see how the two became linked. Now, it starts with my grandfather, Edgar Miller Elliott. Now, those names, Edgar Miller Elliott, my grandfather was born with a Native name only, a Mohawk. But the federal government insisted, when he went into the residential school, that he have an English name. So they chose the name of a local Methodist minister who had come to the reserve to Christianize us, Elliott, and we took that name. He, of course, is Mohawk of the Six Nations, and he did go to the Mohawk Institute. He has a very interesting journey in the residential school. He was there for 6 years, from 10 to 16 years old. Very formative years, and finally at the end, he decided that it was a very dark place, and he decided to run away. Now, when a young boy like that wants to run away, and oftentimes boys of that age do want to run away, he was trying to get away from the schooling. So he didn't ask his friends to come with him. And one night, in the middle of the night, he made a rope out of bed sheets and climbed out the second floor window of the school and then headed out on his own with only a native language, no money, and he only had a vague sense of where he was going. So he followed the Great Indian Trail, which is Dundas, Highway 5, all the way to Detroit. It took him weeks to get there. He had to depend on the goodwill of people he met to feed him, to help him find a warm place to sleep, but it all happened. He got to Detroit, and he was so relieved. He, of course, didn't have a job. He was a young boy. He needed work. And they were just at that point, 1906, they were starting to electrify the city of Detroit, the first city in the United States, anywhere actually, to be electrified. It was the surrogate home of Thomas Edison, a dear friend of of Henry Ford, who was responsible for transforming the city with his assembly line. They asked my father if he would like to have a job putting the infrastructure in for the electric light. Now you can imagine this young boy coming from a place where they only had kerosene lanterns and not even gas. We didn't have gas at Six Nations. And now he's asked to help build the infrastructure for the electric light. He took to it right away and became a lifelong electrician. Also one of the very first electricians anywhere. And he built his business with his sons into a thriving, very successful company in Detroit. But he never forgot Six Nations. I would go to work with him sometimes, and he would say, we're a Mohawk, Bill. Never forget it. And he said, but be very careful who you tell. It might not be to your advantage. So as a young boy, I didn't understand what he was trying to say. I didn't understand when he kept referring to the mush hole, that it was a residential school. What was it like? All I knew that grandfather didn't like it, and that eating gruel or oatmeal reminded him of it, and he wouldn't have it in his house. So that was my first introduction to Native culture, was the residential school. Now, my mom also loved our culture. She married a man who was British. My father was British, an American Brit. His family had come from Great Britain in 1694 and founded the town of Scituate, Massachusetts. My mother's relatives were living up in New York State, our homeland. Do you understand the geography? We're moving from New England to New York State and into southern Ontario. My mom gave me a copy of this painting when I was a young boy, and she told me that this was me. Now, who is this me? His name is Joseph Brant, Tyendinaga. He was a tremendously important figure in the settlement of North America and Upper Canada. He was raised in New York State in our traditional territories, but arranged to move us up into Upper Canada through the grace of George III, the king. And he went to England and visited George III and asked if he would help us resettle our entire community of thousands of people spread across New York State. And George said, I'll help you. He went to his representative in Montreal, Haldeman, and asked Mr. Haldeman to prepare a land grant for us of the Grand River, which we're on today. That land grant would include 6 miles or 10 kilometers either side of the river from its mouth to its headwaters. Where we live today is a very small area that came down to us through the exigencies of time and history and settlement. And even that, they would like to take away from us somehow because it threatens all of the cities up and down the Grand River, including this one, and Guelph, and Kitchener, and Dunnville, and Caledonia, all of these places, thriving settler communities. My mother said, because Joseph Brant spoke impeccable English, he went to the very first residential school in Lebanon, Connecticut, called, it was run by Reverend Wheeler. He was a one-man crusader for the education of Native people and invited prominent young boys from Native communities to come to his school and learn the ways of the settler, how to dress, how to eat, how to speak. And Joseph took it quite quickly. and learned to speak English with an impeccable British accent. Of course, he also, Mohawk is his first language. But he could speak both beautifully and understand both. He became a very important bridger. There's the bridge, the first bridge in my life, Joseph Brandt. So I just can't forget how the importance my mother placed on this painting. This painting hangs in the National Gallery of Canada today. Now, we're going to switch gears to a very, very, very important architect, Frank Lloyd Wright. What has Wright got to do with anything? Well, I'm showing you here on the right his model of an ideal city called Broad Acre. And what he did, he tried to define how we could all live together in our landscape here in North America, in harmony with nature. And cutting through it is a stream and a lake. There's a hill up in this corner, and then here's where most people would live on 1 acre plots with their own gardens. And there would be markets and so forth. But here was a circular stadium, and next to it is a very tall staff, actually the tallest staff in the entire city. In his book, The Living City, where he describes this plan, he calls this tower here a totem and a beacon. A totem, a beacon to the lost tribes of the continent. Oh my God. When I read that in the book, I said, he remembered us native people, and he put us in the most important place in his ideal city. Wow. I asked people about this for years, scholars, Wright scholars and so forth. No one could explain it to me, except that one time I had the opportunity when I was out at Taliesin West in Arizona to meet one of Wright's still living apprentices, woman apprentice, Cornelia Brierly. She was about 90 years old, and we were having lunch with her, and I went to her after lunch and knelt before her and said, "Oh, Cornelia, what a life you've lived. You traveled with that model, the Broad Acre City." She says, "Yes, I did." What is that totem and beacon to the lost tribes of a continent? You know, she said, "I asked Mr. Wright that myself. He told me that when I was showing the model to the public, not to call attention to that phrase that he put, call it a place to display banners for events." But Wright said to her, in one word, that totem is my atonement, or his personal atonement for having taken this land from native people. I was so moved with that confirmation. Here's our map, our aerial map of North America. So this journey is taking me from here, which is Southern Ontario and New York State, way over here to San Francisco. I thought to myself, what am I doing out in San Francisco? My whole life has been spent in lower Michigan and Southern Ontario. It's the world I know. This is the trigger to go into elderhood. I moved to Detroit in 1993 to be close to my father, who was quite elderly, and I wanted to be near him at the end of his life. They offered me a job to teach at a school called Lawrence University. They happened to own a house by Frank Lloyd Wright, and they asked me to teach a course on Frank Lloyd Wright, which astounded me. They happened to be looking for someone just like myself, and I taught a design studio as well. And in the design studio, I began to see Aboriginal themes arising spontaneously out of my desire to give the very best to my students. We would sit around a sacred fire all night dreaming in the Detroit landscape. And yes, my dean, okay, this is very important as well. My dean said, "What are you teaching those children?" It's pagan. He actually called me a pagan. Now, I'm a gay man. I've been called a faggot. I'm not a black person, but I'd be very offended if someone used the N-word on me. But somehow I wasn't offended. I just said, okay, that's you. That's you, that's not me. You can say whatever you like. I've never been called a pagan. And I don't feel that word's appropriate, but what can I say? So, yeah, that was the first trigger that I had to go deep and had to go to the place of wisdom. Now, the California Institute of Integral Studies came into my life when I was at Lawrence. My colleagues, who some of them really liked my teachings, and said, "Thinking like you belong out in California." This is sort of the American idea. People like you belong in California. And I said, "What?" You know, I haven't been out there. Well, go out and see if you can find a place there. Well, it's so serendipitous. It's outrageous. I was in a bookstore at a magazine counter, and they had a magazine called Parabola. They still publish it. It's a magazine of perennial wisdom. It's sort of an anthology, and at the back was an advertisement for this school. And so it looked very interesting. So I called the school up and said, is it possible for me to arrange an interview with someone at the school to see if I would like to come there? "Oh, yes, please come at such and such a time." I made an appointment to see a professor named Jürgen Kramer. So I flew all the way from Michigan to San Francisco. And I was so naive, it was outrageous. I mean, I am not a California person. I dressed in a coat and tie, and I had a briefcase, and it was the antithesis of everything at that school. And Mr. Kramer did not show up for the appointment. So I went to the bookstore, and I found a book that he had written. Oh, I got to show. He wrote this book. Okay, Looking for Dame Yggdrasil. I said, "Oh, what is this about?" But I bought a copy, and while I was waiting for him, I began to read it. And all of a sudden, I began to realize that someone did understand my distance relationship from my own native culture. And that it was a willful cutting myself off from my origins, and that I must reconnect. I said, what a message this is. I can't believe somebody wrote it. But I did try to get in touch with Mr. Kramer, and I said, "Where were you? You didn't come for the appointment." He said, "I was at a sweat lodge." I said, "Okay, the professor can't come because he's at a sweat lodge, but he's German." I was trying to put all this together, but it was very confusing. So I went and sat in on one of his classes. The class was called The Psychology of Shamanic Healing. I said, how would somebody dare to apply psychology to a shaman and healing? But he did it, and during the class, he said, "There's a man here who's come from Michigan to have an interview with me. I don't think I like him." Right to his class. "I don't think I like him." I said, what a greeting. This is the knock at the spiritual door where you get refused. 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 But I kept coming back. Finally, I got an interview with the dean of the school. His name was Dean Elias. He was a very distinguished-looking man. He wore tweed sport coats and tie, and he had a lovely beard. He was very, very different than Jürgen. And he said, "Come and come with your material. I want to see your biography. I want to see your proposal for a doctoral dissertation." So I bought it. I had it all prepared, and I sat across from him while he put those things in front of himself. and he started to cry. Cry. I said, what is this? This is my third knock. What is this? And my other two are being called a pagan, and I don't like this man. Now come tears. I said, why are you crying? He said, you know why? You belong here. You belong here. We have a brand new program that was almost like written for you. It's called The Recovery of the Indigenous Mind. I said, I want you to go home, take the catalog, and read about it. Dr. Kramer is one of the heads of the program. And if you agree with the program and want to join us, then we'll admit you immediately. No application necessary. I said, this is crazy. I mean, no application. There must be something special about this whole thing. So we began, and I had to go to the school in Haight-Ashbury, the home of Jerry Garcia and the Summer of Love and whatever. And I got Bill, are you in the right place? I couldn't tell, except that it did feel good. I was a bit of a misfit for San Francisco, but somehow I didn't care. Now, the California Institute of Integral Studies, I'd really never heard of it. What is it, some kind of trumped-up fake school? Well, it was founded in 1968, which is the year after the Summer of Love in Haight-Ashbury. The head of it was a man, Harudi Shirudi. Now, he's from India. He was invited by Americans to come to the U.S. to teach Asian studies. And he founded the American Academy of Asian Studies. It was incorporated in 1974, as you can see here, and accredited in 1981. Now, they decided to expand the mandate of the American Academy and call it the California Institute of Integral Studies, which is kind of an ambiguous title that a lot of studies could come under it, including the one I was invited to. This is like a totally off-the-wall experience for me. Now, we had benefactors for this program they told me about. The principal benefactor of the program of Recovery Mind is Lawrence Rockefeller from the Rockefeller family. He was the honorary trustee of the California Institute of Integral Studies and gave my teacher $1 million to do the recovery of indigenous mind. So that was a huge thing. She brought $1 million to the school. Then we had Stephen Donovan, who was one of the founders of Starbucks Coffee, which again is so outrageous, the connections that the school had. He was also part of the Assailant community, which is a community in Northern California that had a lot of experimental kinds of teachings, including those with mind-altering drugs. And he was one of the founders of the State of the World Forum. This is another high-minded group. Then we had a woman, Diana Stone, who was from San Francisco, and she had a foundation called the Center for Spiritual Democracy. And it was tied in with Iroquoian culture because she felt that Iroquoians in their great law had replicated spiritual democracy, and she wanted it instituted in the United States. Now, this woman was fabulously wealthy. Her grandfather left her multi thousands and thousands of acres of corn. He was one of the great corn farmers in the U.S., and she was his sole heir. Then we had a last woman, Nancy Connor, who had created the Ringing Rocks Foundation. She was an innovator of, what should I say, computer language and computer programming, and sold her company for a ridiculous amount of money and became a full-time philanthropist. So we had, we had this kind of motley crew of people who had money, let's put it that way. Now, what is this traditional knowledge program? What's it look like? How are they going to teach us? Well, we began the whole thing with a retreat. And the retreat was in Northern California at a place called The Shadows. The Shadows, again, we were the beneficiary of a Hollywood movie producer who had built this retreat center, and he liked our program and gave it to us for the use of our program. It was a beautiful place in a redwood forest. To get there, you had to drive north onto the Lucas Valley Road, which goes right through George Lucas's Sky Ranch. So here we are. I'm encountering Hollywood again as I'm going to this what should I say, retreat. And I'm nervous, and I guess I'm thrilled. I don't know. I don't know what I was feeling, but the students who were in the program, there were 12. There were 12, and this is significant. It was headed by an Oneida woman, Dr. Apila Colorado, and then, of course, a colleague, Dr. Jürgen Kramer, called himself an indigenous Teuton. He was from East Germany. He couldn't stand living there because of his history, and he moved to California. And then we had another woman who had a doctorate, Dr. Wendell Cooper. She is Cherokee, and she was our surrogate grandmother for the program. So I'm introduced to all these people. I really trying to get used to like who they could be. Then the second part is the cohort residencies received the permission of the local Native community. Oh, I didn't even know there were Native people in Northern California. I'd never heard of them. That's because they were almost completely wiped out in the gold rush. But some survived, including a woman, Esther Pinola, who came to our residencies and gave us permission to carry out our work on the land of her ancestors. This was a teaching that we were supposed to carry into our own lives, to always ask permission to carry out your work from the local Native community. We've never done that here at Waterloo. Then the field cohort residencies. After the first session, we had to have our next residency in Mexico. Now, I didn't have a lot of money, and we had to pay for these trips ourselves. But I scraped it together. I sold a lot of my personal possessions. And Apila told us to go out under the night sky and ask for permission from the stars. Now, I just looked at that instruction and I said, this is nuts. She gave us a book on the stars made for children. That was our first study book, a children's book. She said, it's very accurate, and I want you to study it, and then I want you to ask for help from the stars. And so I tried it, and I did connect with the Pleiades. And it was helpful to me, surprisingly. We did go to Mexico. I'll tell you about that in a minute. We studied with an important elder of the Mayans. So we have elders up here, Dr. Colorado and Jürgen Kramer and Wendell Cooper, and, you know, I'm communicating with elders, and I don't even know what an elder is, really. And then we're introduced now to some very sophisticated elders. Then the next residency was in Hawaii. Hawaii. So I had to fly to Hawaii, you know. I was living in Toronto, and it was in Maui, in Lahaina. I'd never really given second thought to Lahaina and Maui. But of course, when I got there, I realized why it was famous. It had an otherworldly atmosphere, similar to San Francisco, but very different. It was a special place. And then we had another residency later in the program in Atlanta, Georgia. Why Atlanta, Georgia? Well, because of a single man. I'll show you his picture in a minute. Dr. Charles Finch III. Brilliant human being. The first black doctor to be graduated from Harvard. He taught at the Black College, Morehouse, and he had studied tribal African medicine and tried to integrate it into Western medicine. This was groundbreaking work. And then we went to Scandinavia with an elder there, which I'll tell you about, Berit Killio. That was an experience, because I never again thought about northern Scandinavia before as an Aboriginal place. I mean, I was very naive. And then we had a teacher who came from Africa. And that was an experience, because the African energy is so, I don't know, it's magical, it's energizing, and very different than the Scandinavians or the black people or Hawaii or Mexico. I mean, this learning cohort with these residencies was stunning to me. And I was all doing it from my loft in downtown Toronto at Bathurst and Richmond Street. I told you about looking for Dame Yggdrasil, the Schismogenesis. That book, by the way, explained Hitler to me. I understood Hitler, and I understood why Jürgen was in North America and not in East Germany. It brought me very close to the European trauma, which I didn't really associate with North America. I thought we're just happy people, free of history, free of... No. We're carrying it with us. And I had another beautiful encounter accidentally with a man from Holland, which isn't in this lecture, but he had a tremendous influence on me because he did therapy in Holland, helping people to come to grips with past life memories that were hurting their present life. I'd never again heard of this kind of practice, but he introduced me to it, and he used native totems in his work. And he came to Six Nations, where I met him, to ask permission. So again, permission from Europe to use art. I saw a dialogue happening that is, first of all, it's very life-affirming. It makes you feel like you're part of something that people pay attention to. Here you see the picture of this Golden Gate Bridge from afar. Where, see, this is down here at the bottom is this most amazing neighborhood called Pacific Heights. It's fabulously wealthy, American wealth. And then over here on this side, well, you have Alcatraz out over here, and then you have the Marina District and the place where I graduated, which I was showing Adrian a little earlier. Then here, just look at the map for a minute. Here I am, California Institute of Integral Studies, here. And then at the shadows up here, the Golden Gate Bridge. This became the realm of my visits to San Francisco. I wasn't in San Francisco as a tourist. I was in San Francisco as a participant in the San Francisco culture. And this is a picture of what the redwood forest looked like at the shadows. Very dense. The reason it's called the shadows is the redwoods, they're so tall and they have lots of foliage at the top, and they cut out all the natural light to the forest floor, except in intermittent places like this photograph shows the light coming through. Um, Now, in a redwood forest, the redwoods grow, and they grow to an ancient size, and then either through fire or age, they fall. But what they've done, they put out runners all around the mother trunk. And those runners become trees themselves. And the core of the place where the mother tree fell is left as an open space, which is what you see here in this photograph. In the middle of that open space, we created a sacred fire. And when we would arrive for the residencies, which took place for 7 or 8 days, we had a full-time firekeeper who kept that fire burning for the entire time we were there. Again, another great teaching. My teacher said to me, if you're in this program, you have to be willing to do ceremony. Well, again, I thought, ceremony. Okay, what kind of ceremony? And one of the first ceremonies was when the grandmother, Wendell Cooper, did an honoring of the 4 directions. And, she started at the north and then moved to the west and the south and the east. And I said to myself, this is right out of a New Age workbook, that I saw in Toronto. This is corny. And so I said that after she was finished. I said, this is really corny. And they said to me, no, Bill, no judgment. This is one of your first lessons. No judgment. Do not judge Dr. Cooper. This is something that all Native people do. If you think it's kind of silly, well, go to your Native ancestors. They do it as an everyday part of their life. I said, there's so much I don't know. I'm sort of going through the program very reluctantly. Should I continue this journey? I mean, it's so earth-shattering to me. And yet, I had nothing to do in Toronto. I closed my architectural practice, which I had for 20 years. And so basically, I was jobless, but I did have funding for this program. It was kind of expensive. 6 nations paid for half of my tuition and my living expenses, and the other half I had to come up myself, which I had to do through a loan. I hated to do it, but I would not be able to continue in the program without paying my tuition. Now, this photograph is of Dr. Cooper. And she was a lovely, lovely, wise woman. She's here with her sacred drum in front of her, sitting in the crouch of a eucalyptus tree. Again, I never encountered eucalyptus, but there's a lot of them in San Francisco, and it's a beautiful tree, grayish green. And of course, it has the beautiful scented eucalyptus leaves. And this is where we met together in a circle. Then we're at the shadows here, and you're seeing the 3 great elders, which had so much influence on me. We're starting here with Dr. Jürgen Kramer. Now, he wore his hair quite long in kind of a native style. And as I said, he called himself an indigenous Teuton. He arranged for a sweat lodge for us, but he said, we're carrying out the sweat lodge in the German way. It's called a cider. So we did the sweat lodge. Again, I'd never heard of sweat lodge. And this is my first encounter with it. And some of the students in the program had a very hard time with it because it made them sick. The sweat lodge was so hot, and we were all more or less in kind of a dizzy never land with the heat, and laying in the lodge exhausted, asking when can we leave, But we did it, and Jürgen, was watching us. He's actually grading us on our response to the cider. Now, in the middle, we have Dr. Charles Finch. Dr. Finch, I have to say, you can see he's wearing an African neckpiece here. He's a very civilized American. And I say Harvard-educated doctor. And just speaking with him, you say this man has like amazing intelligence. He invited us to go to Atlanta, where his Morehouse School is, and we met the students there, and we went into the forest and had ceremony. Their ceremony was Southern American, based on healing, spiritual healing, and they did some demonstrations for us. I found it all a bit far-fetched, but I just attended quietly. Now, the third man. This man is the most extraordinary influence on me. This is Hale Makua. Hale Makua lives on the big island of Hawaii. He was, before he passed away, the most noted Hawaiian elder on all of the islands. And this man had a wonderful, warm wisdom about him. And I went up to him, just the two of us, one morning before breakfast. It was just he and I in the room. And I said, Mr. Makua, I have a question for you. I said, what do you think of men who love other men? Because I was genuinely interested. He said, come over here. Give me a big hug. Be who you are. And that gave me the strength to accept my sexuality, I have to say. He said, Bill, let's sit down for a moment. You're a very special man. Oh, I am? Yeah. He said, the chief has one spirit, the spirit of the people. That's not you. The shaman, he has two spirits. He's going back and forth between two worlds. That's not you. You, good man, have 5 spirits. I'm not going to go into detail about them, but you're carrying 5 worldviews within yourself. And your job is, while you're here, to weave them together, bridging again. You must bridge them all together. Wow. And then he said to me, this was amazing to me. He said, you will be the architect of the most beautiful temple of all time. I said to him, I'm just a little nobody in a second-rate country, just struggling as an individual. He said, that's okay. He said, because it's not what you think it is. It's not one of those Gothic cathedrals or stupas or Buddha. No. It's a secret place. And it's a dark opening in a very dense forest. And when you go into that opening, you're shot through like an arrow. And at the other end, you're awake. You actually understand why everything is what it is. And you're laughing. You're laughing in happiness. And you're awake, Bill. You're going to do the Temple of Awakening. We'll see. I don't know. He said, well, just get ready. The ancestors will have instructions for you. This is the kind of teaching he's giving me. I said, why is he giving it to me? He must trust that there's something in me that is worthy of that teaching. Now, this is another elder we studied with in Mexico, Merida, Mexico. This man his name is Humbotzman. Humbotzman is one of the rare teachers of Mayan culture. His life is under constant threat from the Mexican government because they don't want the Mayans to reclaim their culture. They find it threatening. But Mr. Humbotzman continues. So he took us to the very first Mayan temple. And I was used to thinking, we're going to go to one of those Mayan pyramids and all this. No, it was a very modest little place right on the shore facing the Caribbean. And it was a little temple it's called the Temple of the 7 Dolls. It's a little temple with openings in the 4 directions again. Okay, well, I've heard the 4 directions from Brendel. Now we have it here from the Mayans. And at the bottom of the temple in the earth, they found these little clay dolls. They were only maybe 2 centimeters high. They were the seven clay dolls. And I recognized the clay dolls from our creation story, because in our creation story, one of the twins creates human beings from clay, little clay figures. And here are the Mayans doing the clay figures. Oh. Then Mr. Homebotsman took us down to a cenote to do a prayer for us as doctoral students. He asked the ancestors to bring all things to our memory which have been forgotten. He said to us, we can remember what's been taken away from us. Wow, it's just like beautiful news. Then he turned to me and he said, Bill, your people have been here before. I see it in you. You came to visit us. And you didn't take our land away. You didn't hurt us. You learned from us. Then you went back home. This is why a lot of our culture you see reflected in yours, like the 7 dolls. I say, again, I'm really, like, this is very good news, but it is news. Because this is not how people are taught by anthropologists or archaeologists. But I'm hearing it directly from a Mayan teacher. Who should I trust? I said, well, definitely Mr. Homebotsman. Now here, you see a picture of the great Sami shaman, Biret Khalil. When she came to California to sit with us, I was a little bit distrustful of her in a way. She had a shamanic drum with beautiful pictures on it. She said it was thousands of years old, and it was her drum. She gave us a drumming exercise where we went into the ground to retrieve our spirit animal. I thought to myself, when she's doing it, we're laying on the floor, that this will never work for me. That I couldn't project myself into that. As a matter of fact, I was dreaming I was in the air and that I was the bear. I thought, oh, gee, I messed up the exercise. When it was over, she went around the circle and it came to me. And I said, I made a mistake, Barrett. I went into the air. Oh, well, you know what? You're the bear. You do go into the air. That's just the point. The bear is in the air. I said, yes, I remember in one of our drawings of our creation that the elder had asked a bear to be put in the air over Sky Woman falling onto the back of a turtle. There was a bear there. And no one's been able to explain why the bear was there. But now you're saying, yes, the bear is in the air. She said, and we're waiting for him to return to Samiland. Because, again, World War II. Hitler took it all away from us, tried to crush us as Sami people, and take our land. He wasn't successful, but he tried. Whoa, okay. Now, we went to, that evening, we went to a beach called Stinson Beach, north of the Shadows. It's a very well-known beach in San Francisco, and we had a dinner there. And then I was sitting next to her, and she handed me that drum. She just, here, take it. I said, I don't want it. It's too powerful. No, take it and play it for us. I said, I can't play the drum. I said, yes, just simple. Da, 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 da. I'm doing this. I said, I can't believe that I am playing the shaman's drum. Then she said, oh, look over your shoulder, Bill. I said, well, I can't see. Oh, it's a star. And guess what? It's the Noidi star. It's the shaman's star. It's over your shoulder. I said, oh, no, I don't want this. I don't want it. But I'll take it, I guess, she is my teacher. So this program is annealing me. Now, we're going to continue on with the rest of the program. We covered the first 3 items. This one is we have to construct a course of encounters anchored in the fundamentals of indigenous ways of knowing and personal transformation. I had to create my own set of courses. Wow. Then I have to do local research at 6 nations of the Grand River and throughout the Haudenosaunee territory surrounding Lake Ontario with Jacob Thomas, my teacher, Isabel Miracle, my clan mother, and Tom Porter, another well-known Mohawk elder. Number 6, the recovery of the source of migration to and from England. Because I do have British ancestors, I had to own them and follow their journey in England, which I did. And then I had to write a dissertation constructed in the protocols of participatory and traditional indigenous understandings of research. This is a different type of research. This is, Adrian, pay attention. It is participatory. And in the indigenous way, you don't ask questions. The questions are answered for you just by you being present. No questions. So that was confusing to me. How am I ever going to write something like that? And then 8, dissertation is framed in the forms of vision and prayer proposed and submitted in Lahaina, Maui, Hawaii, with Mary Jones, who was another Choctaw woman who came into our circle, and Mr. Holly McCooey, and Auntie Poi Poi, who is I would say she is the Hawaiian mother, Auntie Poi Poi. They call them aunties. And then here is the set of items that we have to address. The first one we have to do is going to address fundamental perspectives, 2 research methods, language and consciousness. I had to learn Mohawk for that. Traditional ecological knowing, spirit and archetype. These are the assignments. They're crazy because they're so kind of elusive. But this was our instruction. This is a picture of the cenote that Mr. Hombotsman took us to in Mayan country. There is a picture of the teacher I came in touch with, which is another great moment for elderhood. The finest elder of the 20th century at 6 nations of the Grand River, Jacob Ezra Thomas. And he chose me to be his friend and confidant for 3 years before he died. I was privy to everything that happened to him, every meeting he had with people, no matter how discreet they might be. I was the one he could tell everything to. And I said to him, why me in this position of all things? I mean, I didn't grow up here. He said, Bill, you understand. That's all I want. I want to be around an understanding spirit. And you do understand. And I'm grateful you're here. I go, what an honor. Again, I pierced the door of the deepest, or the threshold of the deepest traditional person at 6 nations. I couldn't believe it. And I love the man profoundly. And then here is Isabel Miracle, my adopted clan mother. Isabel gave me my name. And she trained me in speaking the Thanksgiving address. She'd go to a tree and do it in the Mohawk language, and then she'd ask me to do it in English, because you're going to be teaching it. Wow, okay. Now, when I was in the program, I produced some drawings that sort of consolidated my understanding. This one is the cycle of our ceremonies through 12 months. And this line represents the length of days, these being the longest days, these being the shortest days. Up here we have the bear and the Pleiades, the midwinter ceremony. Then we go through one by one, 15 including things like the bush ceremony, the little green corn, the big green corn, the Hadui mask. I mean, all of our ceremonies are consolidated in a cycle of 12 months. Inside the cycle of 12 months, I have another cycle of 28 phases of the moon, because they're working together, the sun and the moon, and I wanted to do a drawing that consolidated those two things, and here it is. And then I wanted to do a drawing of our ancient longhouse in its context with the path of the sun and the moon. What happened to I've lost contact here. Oh yeah, there we are. The path of the sun and the moon, and our whole culture here, the tree through which Sky Woman fell to earth and gave birth to our long house. We are the Haudenosaunee, the people who live in a long house. Now, I had tremendous confirmation of all of this through archaeology. I was at a meeting between archaeologists and settlers who were trying to help us do a reproduction longhouse for tourist purposes. And I was very frustrated by how settlers sort of took charge of our culture for their own uses. There was an archaeologist there who said to me, do you know anything about archaeology? I said, not a thing. This is another knock. Not a thing. Would you like to learn? Would you be willing to learn? And I said, well, I've been taught not to dig things up. But he said to me, I'd like to show you the footprint of an actual longhouse and the footprint of fires that were in the longhouse. 600 years old. You can see it. If you get in the car with me, we'll drive up to Barrie and I'll show it to you, which he did. And it just blew me away. There I could see the actual evidence. So I continued to work with them for several years, and it was not to my advantage. The people at Six Nations were kind of upset with me, but my teacher, Jake, said, go ahead, work with them. You might have something to teach us. As it turned out, I did. Six Nations now works with archaeologists, principally because of my efforts. I mean, I hate taking so much credit, but there's a truth in it. And then these are some of the titles of the actual papers I wrote. And you can see the titles are very evocative, like this one, The Revolving Realm of All Our Relations. What is that? Or Walking in the Body of Creation. This was body consciousness. Morning Star, It Is Bright. That's the title of my dissertation. It's Venus. Remembering Languaging, an autopoetic weaving. So what I did, I'd written poems over a course of 30 years. I took all of my poems and took sections from every poem and wove it into one poem. An autopoietic weave. Autopoiesis, where you're reflecting back on yourself and learning from your own expressions. Autopoiesis. I thought it was a beautiful word. Wayfarer in the Shadowlands. I also studied people at Six Nations who were seminal. This one is Pauline Johnson, the poet. I mean, we have a marvelous history to look at. Here's another one. Invocation of sheathing and body swathing. Again, the body is very important to Native people, and it's often overlooked because we have this antipathy about the body that cuts us off from the way Native people are intimate with their bodies, and it's not because we're sexualized. It's because we find the body such a beautiful gift of the Creator. The fact that we have a torso, 2 arms, 10 fingers, 2 legs, and our head and our toes, and it's just, they have songs that address those things, and we're looking at each other. We're walking. The other thing, Iroquoians, they have this phrase, "Io," Ontario. It means beautiful, and we apply it to people. When you meet people, you go. Well, we'll take Adrian. We'll say, Adrian, Io. He is a beautiful man. Yeah. And it's not meant to be offensive. It's not meant to be, disrespectful by any means. But it could be interpreted that way. Hugging is another thing. Native people always hug. Some people have an aversion to hugging. This is not the native way. If a native person wants to hug you and you don't receive it, it's a real insult. Because it's a safe thing to do in our minds. But for some people, it's not safe. If they've been violated, for instance, we never know what people go through. But, you have to be careful, this whole notion of the body, which interests me very much because I work out. And I'm very aware of my body in a very good way. And it's helped me to balance things. When I did my doctoral work, I would spend all morning and early afternoon writing. I was exhausted. I get on my bike and bike to the gym and work out. And during that workout, all of the thoughts from the morning would all of a sudden get consolidated. And I had to have a notebook at the front desk to write down thoughts that were coming to me. So it became a rhythm for 2 years. Writing, working out, writing, working out. It was a beautiful cycle. So, now, the England, just to show you the epic scope of the journey that's in my ancestors. This is the Alnwick Castle in northern England. It belonged to the Percy family. It still belongs to the Percy family. Hugh Percy came to to North America and visited our communities in New York State and fell for it. He learned Mohawk and became a very close friend of Joseph Brant. But he was from a very wealthy family in England. This is his library. It's a magnificent British library of 2 stories. There's also the principal living room of the house. I went there to visit. I'd written ahead and said, I'd like to visit the library and perhaps see some of your material that's written in Mohawk. I understand, that you have some of the rare original volumes. So they said to come, so I did. And they were very, very kind to me, and they asked me to visit the ramparts of the castle, to visit a room they had of archaeology. It turns out that Hugh Percy, their original ancestor, was an amateur archaeologist, the first in England. And he collected artifacts from our territory in New York State, and they were on display. Here I am in northern England, in the ramparts of a castle, seeing artifacts from my own culture, including a portrait of Joseph Brant. I said, this is outrageous. They were very kind and said to me, when you go down to London, we'll call ahead and we'll arrange for you to visit our house in London. I said, wow, I'm not used to this kind of wealth, We have a house called Sion House, right on the Thames. We own more land than Buckingham Palace has, Our ancestors were very close friends, always close friends of the monarch. And in that house, you're going to see a beautiful oil painting of your ancestor, Joseph Brant. So the house is interesting. Robert Adams did all the interiors. Robert Adams, the great British designer, worked in plaster. And all the rooms surrounded a circular room in the middle of the castle. It's a beautiful floor plan. This is what it looks like from outside, very unpredisposing. It's not Georgian, it's pre-Georgian. Henry VIII, this was a nunnery. Originally it was built as a home for nuns. Henry VIII was buried from here. His funeral started at Sion House, and then they took him out onto a barge. They had a beautiful collection of barges out into the Thames for burial. Anyway, it has an illustrious history. However, I came in here into the entry hall and introduced myself. And the house manager said, "Oh, Bill, this is a very honored visit. We haven't had someone from Six Nations come here in several years. You're very welcome." And I said, "I would like to see the portrait of Joseph Brant. If you, oh yes, yes, it's in our regalia room." So he walked me here, and this was, yeah, it was this room here, the regalia room. It's where the ducal papers are. But over the door is a portrait of your ancestor, Joseph Brant. That's how much our family loved him. So I said I bought a little gift for the house. It's just an enameled pin with our Confederacy wampum design. And he said, "Oh, good, we'll put it on display here, somewhere in the ducal room." I said, "Really?" I said, "That." I said, "Well," I walked around the room. I said, "Well, this cabinet with the ducal papers, maybe we could put it down in the corner." "Whatever you like." So I want you to go in and now write a description of it for us, which I did. These are the portraits. This is the portrait over one door. The opposite door had an important figure from our culture as well, John Norton. He was a Scotsman and part Cherokee. And when Joseph Brant passed away, he gave over the warriorship at Six Nations to John Norton. And John Norton led us in the War of 1812. Brant had died before the 1812 in 1804. So these two men were important warriors in our culture. And here they are over the doors at Scion House. I thought, this is like too moving to describe. And then, of course, this is the deer of my deer clan, my adopted deer clan. Now, to just show you how this program introduced us to very potent settings, there's something called the State of the World Forum. Okay, it's held every 4 years in San Francisco, but this particular year, in 2000, just before 9/11, they held it in New York. And it's about very influential people getting together from politics and public life, talking about the future of the planet. It's very overarching, if I could say so. These people think they're very important, and maybe they are. But anyway, it's very expensive to attend. It's $5,000 just to get in. And one of our benefactors paid for our visit there. And my teacher said, "We have been given a room to do what we like with, and I want to build a longhouse in it." It's a conference room at the Hotel, Avenue of the Americas. It's on Avenue of the Americas. It's the hotel, the Americana Hilton, I think. Anyway, vast hotel. And so this was my assignment. And I'm in Ontario, I'm in Toronto. So I had some friends who were very adventurous, and they got together the wood for this and took it to New York, and we did build the longhouse there. And well, without going into too much detail about it, it was an assignment that was part of my getting my dissertation. I had to do this plan. Now, the other last piece, so beautiful. I had to have a healing from cultural anger. I was very angry when I put all the history together. This is the last step toward elderhood. My teacher, Jacob Ezra Thomas, said, "Bill, we recognize your anger, and you've got a good reason. However, you cannot be an elder and angry. So we're going to give you five more years to be angry, and then you have to stop." So my teacher, Gwendale Cooper, said the same to me, and she said, "I'll facilitate a healing for you by a Navajo healer out here, out west." I said, "This is, again, kind of nuts." I have to go out to, quote, San Diego to get a healing. Well, why can't I do something closer to home? But that's not the way it worked out. So I went out to San Diego and had this amazing healing in the Navajo tradition by a man, Larry Emerson, right here. And everything was done on my behalf, August of the year 2000. Now, again, I'm sort of a reluctant elder, so to speak. Yeah, we're over time. Yeah, sorry. This is the last piece. At any rate, when he did the ceremony, called in the ancestors to remove bad medicine from my heart, he sang the beautiful ceremony which I had heard of, but here it was being administered to me. May beauty go before me. May beauty be to the right of me. May beauty be to the left of me. Be below me, above me, behind me. I am restored in beauty. I am restored in beauty. I am restored in beauty. And he's throwing corn pollen on me. My God, I said, I've read about this ceremony. I never thought I would be in it. Participatory research. Oh. So this led to the denouement of my dissertation, which was, I had to give back. I'd received so much. And my giving back was to create a sacred ceremonial site in Toronto with a series of ceremonies to adopt and heal all the citizens of the city in order of their ancestry. I called it Toronto, a beacon to the ancestors. There's the site for it. It's on Lake Ontario in the Portlands. That's what it looks like. It's a poplar forest. And this is our wampum for condolence, comforting, and grief to visitors. And this is the site plan of it, the central lodge and 2 longhouses. And then I showed this to Adrian. This is where we graduated from in San Francisco, built for the 1903 San Francisco World's Fair, Bernard Maybach, the Legion of Honor, on a beautiful pool in the Marina District. It's a gorgeous building, and to be graduated from there was quite something. Yeah. Okay, that's it.